and Jewish historians who corroborate the events described in the New Testament. And I am borrowing a lot from this booklet by Dr. Robert Newman on the biblical narratives of Easter week. Are they trustworthy? And also from his slide talk on the Star of Bethlehem. But did you know that by using astronomy, we can actually pin down almost the exact dates of Jesus' birth, ministry, death, resurrection, and ascension? Using computer projections into the past of planetary orbits and lunar eclipses, we can know when certain events of Jesus' life occurred. Here is my astronomical biography of Jesus. Sorry, it's not. Oh, there it goes. Okay. All right. So these are the 11 dates that I'm going to talk about. All right. So the first astronomical date is August 12th, 3 BC, the first astronomical signs to the wise men. The wise men were probably astronomers or astrologers living in Babylon or Persia. Perhaps they were Jewish exiles left over from the Babylonian captivity of the 500 BCs. In any case, there was an interest among such people to look for signs in the stars which would portend future events. On August 12, 3 BC, there was a conjunction between the planets of Jupiter and Venus in the constellation of Leo the Lion. If Leo represents the tribe of Judah, this would have been a sign to any astronomers who knew something of Jewish traditions that something would be about to happen affecting the tribe of Judah. Therefore, after this date, astronomers would be carefully watching the night sky for future signs. August 3rd, 3 BC, the Annunciation to Mary by the angel Gabriel. In Luke 1, 26 to 33, the angel Gabriel appears to Mary to tell her that she would be having a son who would inherit the throne of David. Mary is puzzled. How should this be, seeing that I know not a man? Now, on August 3rd, 12 BC, 12 days before the supposed conception date of Jesus, there is a close planetary conjunction between the planets Mercury and Venus. Whether astronomers would take this as a special sign or not is debatable. Admittedly, this interpretation is based only on looking at the events after the fact. But another possible fit is that women have an approximate 20-day menstrual cycle. Fertilization of an egg is only possible in the middle of the month. If Mary was having her period when Gabriel arrived, she would know that she was not pregnant, not only by not knowing a man, but also by the time of the month. Mary was not yet pregnant when talking to Gabriel, as he says to her that the Holy Spirit will come upon her in the future to accomplish this miracle. Thus, having the conception of Jesus about 2 weeks later fits in with this chronology. On September 3rd, 3 BC, another peculiar astronomical event happened. The sun was at the feet of Virgo, the Virgin. So you can see I don't know how the names of the astronomical constellations came about, but
I don't know if the laser pointer is going to work when the TV does.
okay, all right, that won't work. All right. So the sun was in the constellation of Virgo, the Virgin, when the moon arose. It also rose at the feet of Virgo. This sounds like what John is seeing in Revelation 12:1. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed in the sun, and the moon under her feet. Now, Revelation goes on to say that the woman is pregnant and is about to give birth. Some take this imagery to be the birth of Jesus, but it would hardly be a sign to astrologers that someone special had been born, especially compared to the later conjunction of Jupiter and Venus. The book of Revelation has lots of figurative language, so it would not be too much of a stretch that the whole pregnancy process from conception to birth is represented in this one image. Now in Luke 2, 1-5, Luke gives a reason why Joseph returned to visit Bethlehem at an extremely inconvenient time as Mary was very pregnant. Caesar Augustus had decided to have a census in Judea. The question arises as to when this census took place, or at least when the census took place in Bethlehem. While there are no astronomical events to correlate with this census, it must have been taking place in the spring or summer of 2 BC to fit in with my astronomical chronology. Now Luke says that a census took place when Quirinius was first governing Syria. Josephus says that Quirinius made a census in 6 AD, about 7 years later than in my chronology. However, this does not preclude that Quirinius was also governing Syria and Judea in 2 BC. That 2 BC would be when he was first governing Syria. And then later he governed Syria again in 6 AD. So Josephus' statement does not preclude that a census took place in different parts of the country at different times. There is simply not enough evidence to say that there was no census in 2 BC. However, there is enough evidence to say that a census would cause Mary and Joseph to travel to Jerusalem. The centerpiece of this astronomical biography is the interpretation of the Star of Bethlehem. Matthew 2, 1-2 says, "Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that was born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him." On the evening of June 17, 2 BC, there was a close conjunction of the planets Jupiter and Venus. Estimates of such a close conjunction range between once every 1,000 to 34,000 years. Thus, for Middle Eastern astrologers, this conjunction would be the brightest star they had ever seen. Furthermore, the conjunction occurred in the constellation of Leo, like the previous conjunctions. And a few months previous, the planet Jupiter circled the star Regulus, the so-called king star. Okay. So this is Leo the lion, and the Jupiter had circled Regulus, the so-called king star, when undergoing retrograde motion before its conjunction with Venus. This series of extremely unusual events are signs fitting to announce the birth of the most important person in human history. After seeing this bright star, the wise men decided to travel to Jerusalem to see the newborn king. That's an example of planets making retrograde motion. And you can see, at least with the one on the left, how Jupiter could appear to circle a star. And it circled the Regulus star, the king star, in the constellation of Leo. Now, the traditional date of the birth of Jesus is December 25th. Many people have pointed out that this date seems to be out of place, as it requires Joseph to make a trip to Bethlehem in the winter to comply with Augustus's decree. and it has the shepherds watching over their sheep outdoors in the cold. However, having Jesus born during the summer removes the unnaturalness of the timing of both Jesus' trip and the shepherd's night behavior. December 25th, 2 BC. After the wise men arrive in Jerusalem, Herod the Great tells them to search for their newborn king in Bethlehem. Matthew says that the star which they saw in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child lay. Now I have to do some speculation here. If we interpret the star to be the planet Jupiter, Jupiter will wander in the night sky, at times undergoing retrograde motion, and even stopping at times relative to the fixed stars. If Jupiter would be at a stopping point in its motion, this would be on December 25th, 2 BC. As you can see that Jupiter's moving on the night sky, and where it turns around, stops, and makes retrograde motion, it happened to be on December 25th, 2 BC.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So how would they follow the star? So how would the wise men follow the star if you just see a planet moving in the sky?
No,
This may
they
show
see
my
it-
ignorance of astronomy,
the
but
star reappears in the east, and they're looking for the star.
so they would just go east?
Yes, that's right. They're
Okay.
just, they see Jupiter again. Remember, Jupiter is moving around the sky. It goes out of, you don't see it, and then it comes back into view, depending where the Earth and Jupiter are.
Okay.
All right? So this time, when they're traveling in 2 BC, they come and see the star, or Jupiter, stop and begin to undergo retrograde motion. They would say that they saw the star stop in the sky. Now, there's no way for the wise men to know that Jupiter stood over where the young child lay from natural light alone. So Newman suggests that there must have also been some supernatural component to what the wise men saw to act as a special light to lead them to the house where Jesus was now living. In any case, December 25th, 2 BC, while not the birthday of Jesus, should be celebrated as the day that the wise men gave presents to Jesus.
So it's not really December 25, so.
No, it's when the wise men showed up. Wise men showed up, okay? Now, Matthew Gospel says that that God told the wise men in a dream to not report back to Herod when they had found the newborn king. So they returned home without telling him. At the same time, an angel told Joseph to flee to Egypt with Jesus and Mary, as Herod was about to kill Jesus. The Jewish historian Josephus wrote in his book Antiquities that Herod the Great died after an eclipse of the moon, but before the next Passover. Now, Passover occurs in March or April. Looking at NASA's catalog of lunar eclipses, we find that there was a lunar eclipse that could be seen in Israel on January 10th, 1 BC. Okay, now remember, in the traditional dating system, there is no year 0 BC or 0 AD. The years go from 1 BC to 1 AD. To allow for numerical calculations, all BC dates are negative years plus 1 in the NASA calendar. So the year 1 BC is 0 in the NASA catalog. So even though NASA says this is year 000, January 10th, you have to
Add 1 year.
subtract a 1. So this is 1 BC, And the dot in the middle shows the point of the total lunar eclipse at night. So there's a lunar eclipse, and you can see that it encompasses Israel. All right? So we know that Herod the Great died sometime after this eclipse, but before the next Passover. All right. Thus Herod's order to kill all the baby boys in Bethlehem, 2 years old and younger, would have occurred sometime during the last part of December 2 BC or the first part of January 1 BC, when Herod realized the wise men would not be returning to him. Now, most historians have placed the death of Herod the Great in 4 BC because there was also another lunar eclipse visible in Judea in that year. Thus, it has been common to claim that Jesus was born in 6 to 4 BC. However, if the lunar eclipse of Josephus is the one of 1 BC, then Jesus' life chronology perfectly aligns with the astronomical patterns, while there are no astronomical correlations with the 4 BC lunar eclipse. The Gospel of Luke tells us that Jesus began his public ministry when he was about 30 years of age. Doing a straightforward math calculation using June 17th, 2 BC as his birthday, we come to 29 AD. Therefore, I can approximate that Jesus began his ministry around June 17th, 29 AD, since Luke says about 30 years. The actual beginning could be slightly earlier or later than this computed date. Furthermore, Luke 3:1 says that the ministry of John the Baptist began sometime in the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar. Augustus Caesar died on August 19th, 14 AD. So the 15th year of Tiberius would be between August 20th, 28 AD, and August 19th, 29 AD. Since John was the forerunner of Jesus, if John began preaching in the early part or middle part of Tiberius's 15th year, then Luke's date of John the Baptist fits in with my astronomical chronology of the beginning of Jesus' public ministry. This is not a technical paper with every detail annotated, so I'm going to quote a number that the length of Jesus' public ministry was about 3.5 years. All right, this is usually computed because they mentioned 3 different Passovers in the Gospels. All right, now, if you give me some leeway with the about 30 years from the previous section, it would be about 3 3/4 years from June 17th, 29 AD to the time of the Passover in March or April 33 AD. In the book of Acts, Peter, on the day of Pentecost, gives a speech to the Jews in Jerusalem. In it, he made the statement that one of the signs that God gives to show that something special is that the moon will turn into blood, and that some of these signs happened when Jesus died, as they all knew from recent events. So-called blood moons occur when there is a lunar eclipse. The occulting of the sun's direct light by the earth and the bending and scattering of indirect light by the earth's atmosphere will often produce a reddish color on the moon, making it look like it turned to blood. We know that Jesus died on Passover. Passover occurs on the first full moon after the spring equinox. The date of the spring equinox is around March 20th of every year. Looking through the NASA Lunar Eclipse Catalog for March and April and the years around 33 AD yields only one candidate date. On April 3rd, 33 AD, there was a partial eclipse of the moon visible from Jerusalem, which could have produced the blood moon referenced by Peter. Thus, we can pinpoint the date that Jesus died on the cross. Furthermore, using a time and date calculator, April 3rd, 33 AD is also a Friday, which agrees with the Bible that Jesus died on Good Friday. All right, now note that these dates are all on the so-called Julian calendar, all right? The calendar we're on, the Gregorian calendar, didn't start until October 4th, 1582. All right, so these dates are on the Julian calendar. Using the date of April 3rd, 33 AD as the date of the crucifixion, we can easily calculate the date of Easter Sunday. Jesus rose from the dead on Sunday, April 5th, 33 AD. Jesus appeared to Mary Magdalene and the other women, the 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus, and later the apostles, minus Judas, of course, but also minus Thomas on the same day. 8 days later, after the resurrection, now this is like 7 days counting in our system, Jesus appeared to the remaining 11 apostles, including Thomas. The final event in Jesus' earthly life was his ascension into heaven. Acts 1:3 says that this took place 40 days after the resurrection. This was bring us to May 17th, 33 AD. But in the counting of the 40 days in the biblical text, it may be only 39 days in our counting system. So Jesus probably ascended into heaven on May 16th, 33 AD. Now, deep down inside, everybody is superstitious, meaning everyone interprets low probability events as being directed by an outside force. Even mathematicians, like myself, who know that many things happen just by chance, do not really believe in this explanation when the odds get too low. I can calculate the chances of winning the lottery. Although the odds are really, really small, I know that someone is going to eventually win. Yet, I will think that God wanted me to win if I ever won the lottery. So with the above coincidences between astronomy and the life of Jesus, you have to say to yourself that Jesus must be a very special person to have all these astronomical events correlate with important events in his life. Couple this with our calendar years being based on his birth, that Christmas is the most important economic event in every year. What more sign does one need to believe that Jesus is the Son of God who came to save people from their sins who would only believe in him? All right. So, I also want to compare this next thing here. Oh, that's a little small. But as far as the writings of the New Testament go, that we have manuscripts, almost the earliest manuscripts are like less than 200 years from the time of Jesus. If we compare them to other things of ancient history, like Josephus, the earliest manuscript we have of him is like 900 AD, 800 years after the fact instead of 100 to 200 years. Tacitus, 800 years. Pliny the Elder, 800 years. Herodotus, the earliest manuscripts we have of him are like 1,400 years after the events. Thucydides, 1,300 years. Xenophon, 1750. Polybius, 1,100 years. So if you want to believe in ancient history, that you need to believe that in Jesus, all right? Because his life. Yes, his life is the best attested of ancient history, meaning anything before like 500 AD. All right? And I have my last question here for you. Oh, yes, I have this slide here. Now, I run across stuff like this all the time. You know, what do people think of the Bible? That it's biased information based on a lack of evidence. Well, I have to say that they're just ignorant. Okay, that if they're going to deny what's in the Bible, they have to deny all of ancient history. They have to say we don't know anything about the Romans, we don't know anything about the Greeks, you know, and you know even with the Old Testament, do you know that the first complete manuscript of the Old Testament is 900 AD? Okay, I mean they're fragments of 200 to 200 BC, whatever, but you know the Old Testament is in the same category as the Roman history.
I learned that the Bible is basic information before leaving Earth.
Yes, but the New Testament is the best attested events of ancient history. All right, and now my last slide here. I gave you one of these things here. All right, if you didn't pick that up, and I will ask before I get to this. I'll ask if you have any questions you want to ask me about the okay.
So when you say that like the Star of Bethlehem appears, it's not like, maybe like I was taught when I was like 5 or 6 or something in Sunday school where it just like pops out of the sky. You're just saying that it's like Jupiter and Venus, was it?
Yes,
Just come in front of each other and just look really bright because
That's
they're
right.
in front of
and
each other.
That's right. That's right. But that's the Star of Bethlehem. Okay. Okay.
I got 2 questions. First
All right.
question is as far as when we call Good Friday, the Jews normally think at dusk is the beginning of the day. So Jesus was crucified Thursday, Friday, or Friday, Saturday, according to their.
Well, he ate the Passover Thursday night and was crucified with his disciples, the Last Supper. On
So he's
Thursday night.
crucified on Friday, but
Friday.
at dusk it turned to Saturday, correct?
Friday night it turned Saturday.
Right. Okay.
So that he so it was Friday at noon or 3
Right,
a.m.
okay. And as far as, is there a feast day that corresponds to Jesus' birth according to astronomical signs?
A feast?
A feast day, Jewish like
Like an Old Testament
Passover?
feast.
I don't know. That I don't
Because
know.
normally God does things on feast days. Feast days are set times that God has according to Jewish beliefs, that normally these things, like even people believe that the second coming of Christ, like trumpets and other things, are certain set times that God has.
Okay, well, I don't know anything about
Okay.
about Jewish feast days for this. Okay. Any other questions? All right, I will get to this last thing here. I hope all of you answered this. This is actually a trick question, okay? Because I gave this to, I usually, when I was doing Awana, I would give this to my Awana kids to fill out once in a while, or to ask them. And this is a trick question, because it says nothing about Jesus on there. So if you don't answer something on the back of, with Jesus, you don't know the gospel, okay? Not to say that some of these things aren't good or some aren't bad, but, the whole point is you want a relationship with Jesus. And so, how do you get right with God? You get right with Jesus, okay? All right, so all I can say is if there's plenty of historical evidence for the life of Jesus, all right? And people who just think Jesus is a myth and all that are just ignorant. I mean, you hear that in secular schools and stuff all the time. Okay.
Okay, so a question not quite on your talk, but just, I guess, on how you think we as Christians should use astronomical events. So, like, for instance, not that I've read his book, mind you, but I know that there's a guy named John Hagee who put a lot of stock on blood moons and when Christ returns.
Okay,
Do you think that it would be like a bad theology to say that, like, Christ will return on a lunar eclipse or on some sort of astronomical event? Or do you
Well,
think that based
that's-
on what has happened historically that would be not a terrible thing?
Well, it does say that there'll be signs, astronomical signs in the sky when Jesus is going to come back. Now, whether, you should be on the watch saying maybe, but I wouldn't go out on a limb like John Hagee did on his four blood moon theory that, I didn't buy, okay?
Doug, have you done any thinking or researching into the Exodus and the probably solar eclipse at the Exodus?
No, I have not.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, Jeremy. You mean lunar eclipse? Okay, now you have to interpret this one. The dot in the middle, that's the point of the maximum lunar eclipse. So the maximum lunar eclipse was in Africa, okay? But all the other parts, you could see the moon being partially swallowed up, all right? Okay, and when it's black or gray, dark gray, that means you couldn't see any lunar eclipse there. But on the next slide. On the next. Okay, the maximum, you see, the maximum lunar eclipse occurred in New Guinea, all right, the time of maximum lunar eclipse. But you see, there was a shadow, a partial lunar eclipse that you could still see in Israel and Jerusalem, all right. And partial lunar eclipses can also produce blood moons.
The graphic above the map
Yes,
makes it look like if it's dark.
I know, that's right, the graphic makes it look, but the map here, it's just the opposite. And I don't know why NASA did it that way, but that's just the opposite, okay?
Do you know anybody who works at NASA that
I don't know, NASA has computed this stuff back for 5,000 years, okay? I know, I know, that's confusing. Okay.
Is this from Greenbelt, NASA?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's computed that, so. But I would have to say the thing that got me was I punched this date in the computer, and I'm hoping it's going to turn out to be Friday. Okay. All right. When I saw the lunar eclipse occurred on April 3rd, 33 AD, that I said it better occur on a Friday. So sure enough, it did. Okay, so you can know exactly when Jesus lived and died, and it fits in with the biblical accounts, which would make it hard to say that people who wrote the Bible lived hundreds of years later and are just making it all up, okay? All right. Okay, so,
I got another fun question
All
for you,
right.
Doug. Totally fun. Are you of the opinion, since it seems you've done a fairly convincing job of calculating the exact date of Good Friday and Easter, should we celebrate Good Friday and Easter on those actual days of the calendar, or you think we should just do what we've always been doing and follow Passover yada, yada, yada.
Well, I guess, if we're gonna do a calendar date, we should switch around, but usually what they do is they wanna, Easter is the first Sunday after the spring equinox, after the first full moon, is the way we calculate it. Now, whether you want to do that or not, I know that people have had church splits over whether they should, calculate it that way or not. So we just have to, be gracious about it. I don't think it matters.
Good.
But, you know what? The Orthodox Church says, part of the Orthodox Church says, if you follow the Gregorian calendar, you're going to hell because you should be celebrating Christmas and Easter and all those days on the Julian calendar. All right. So don't follow the Pope's calendar. Okay.
So there is a disparity between Easter and Passover normally, or they normally fall on the same date?
No. They're approximately the same, but of course, if Easter's always on a Sunday, then it can't follow the day after the first full moon or the first new moon or whatever however the Jews calculate that. And of course, with the Jewish calendar too, since they're on a lunar calendar, they always have to add extra days every so often, and when they add the extra days, which year they add the extra days on to keep the calendar in line with the sun has some play in it.
So there's no 7 days for real?
No, they're always 7 days. It's just when you start the month or which full moon you're going to count. All right, but yeah, it has to be a full moon, right? Because you can't have a lunar eclipse unless there's a full moon. All right. Okay, that's it. All right.
Thanks, Doug.